So I'll tell you what else is disappointing. Donald Trump has to be disappointed this morning because now he's learning that some very prominent Republicans have pretty much said they are not going to be supporting Donald Trump for the presidency. And one of those distinguished Republicans and very well respected over the last 4 decades, really, over 4 different administrations, would be Colin Powell. He's the former Secretary of State. He told Jake Tapper yesterday that he'll be voting. He actually said he'd be voting for Joe Biden. Tapper asked why it's important that he not get reelected, and listen to Colin Powell's response.
Because I think he has been not an effective president. He lies all the time. He began lying the day of inauguration when we got into an argument about the size of the crowd that was there. People are writing books about his favorite thing of lying, and I don't think that's in our interest.
Well, I completely agree with him, but the difference being not only is he saying he's not going to vote for Donald Trump, but he actually is in support of Joe Biden, and he had nothing but nice things to say about Joe Biden. But it's not just Colin Powell who's, and by the way, I agree with everything Colin Powell just said. It's not just Colin Powell that's come out and said this. Now, this is almost unprecedented. When was the last time you had a Republican going for a second term and then a prior president in the last, couple decades that's come out and said they are not going to be supporting Donald Trump? Well, that would be George W. Bush. Listen, I've never been a big George W. Bush fan. He and Dick Cheney started an ill-advised war in Iraq. I don't think George W. Bush was a great president, but I will say this. He did have some leadership qualities, especially after 9/11. I remember that moment where he said, I hear you, the world hears you, in talking to the 9/11 responders. That was a really powerful moment for the president. At that time, at least, the country was coming together. And I also think the Bush family has shown a lot of class over the years. I'll give you a perfect example for that. John McCain's funeral, where Donald Trump was non-existent, by the way. George W. Bush and his family sitting right next to the Obama family. They're friends. They get along together. They don't always agree on politics, and they've been open about that. Listen, we don't agree on a lot of subjects, but we respect one another. One thing I will say about George W. Bush is he respected the office. He respected the presidency. I think that's pretty fair to say. I had a tremendous amount of respect for his father, George Bush Sr. Tremendous amount of respect for him. Didn't always agree with him on everything, but I thought his father was a really, really good man. Listen, George W. Bush, he was born into wealth. He had problems with alcohol. But even with that, I wouldn't look at you and say George W. Bush is a horrible human being. I've never said that about him. I never did. Now, how hard did he work to own a baseball team? Well, that's another story. But again, I felt like the Bush family, they have class. And I think George W. Bush continues to have class. So this is a big deal.
Why would you not say that if you know that the war that we entered into was under false pretenses most likely and actually had to do with oil? Why would you say he was a terrible human being if he was willing to actually put our country at war with another country for most likely his own personal interest?
Sure. Because
I don't know. I understand you don't like Donald Trump as a human being, and I get that. I know you have your reasons. I've heard the checklist a million times, but Donald Trump has never done anything like that, Brian.
Okay, so
or would he?
Okay.
In fact, he's actually been he has tried to avoid war by dealing with the people who are most likely to start wars, like Vladimir Putin or Kim Jong-un, in a different manner. You call it sucking up. I say he's avoiding conflict, whereas George Bush actually was willing to put people at risk for most likely his own personal interests and his family's personal interests over pretenses that were for the most part not true. I mean, they never found any weapons of mass destruction.
All right, what was the question again?
So how can you say that George W. Bush isn't a terrible human being when he was willing to literally put a country at war for himself?
Well, 2 things. First of all, when I say ill-advised war, first of all, everyone knows this. This is Dick Cheney's war. And the person who profited – hold on, let me finish. Got to give me more than 5 seconds to answer your question because it's a long answer. Dick Cheney is the one that financially profited from the war in Iraq. That's number one. Number two, we don't know for sure if George W. Bush knew that there were no weapons of mass destruction. Now, a lot of Republicans claim that it was faulty intelligence, that we got bad intelligence on the matter, and there is still a possibility that George W. Bush went on that faulty intelligence. I believe it was Dick Cheney's war, and I think many other Republicans would agree with me that it was Dick Cheney that was the mastermind behind the war in Iraq. I have no doubt about that. The reason why I'm not willing to say for sure is because we don't know for sure. A lot of people think that 9/11 was an inside job. I've never been one of those people that said that. I've never been one of those people that said 9/11 was 100% an inside job and George W. Bush was behind it. There are things we absolutely know about Donald Trump with the way he's treated women over the years, the lies over the years, the things he's said about women. I could go on, and I don't want to talk about Donald Trump right now because we're not talking about him as a human being. I'm just telling you, as far as what George W. Bush is concerned, I think he's shown a lot more class as president and after president than Donald Trump will ever show. And again, as far as the war in Iraq goes, there's a lot of people that voted for the war in Iraq. A lot of people, including Joe Biden, by the way.
That's because they were under the impression that there were weapons of mass destruction, Brian.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yes.
And there is something called...
And if there weren't any weapons of mass destruction, and I find it hard to believe, I mean, you can say that this was Dick Cheney's war, but by that logic, then Mike Pence is the one that's actually making these crazy tweets about Donald Trump. I mean, George Bush was
no truth to that.
George Bush was the president of the United States. It all falls on him at that point.
I agree, but
Okay.
to say he made a mistake and then to say he did it intentionally are two completely different things. And your analogy you just made about Mike Pence makes absolutely no sense at all because Mike Pence has his own Twitter account and Donald J. Trump has his own Twitter account. So again, the point I'm trying to make here is we don't know if George W. Bush intentionally started the war for sake of financial gain. There's no evidence to back that up. What we do know is that it was obviously a mistake. And what we do know is that if we knew now what we knew back then, the war wouldn't have happened. A lot of people voted for the war in Iraq. A lot of Democrats voted for the war. I mean, I will say this. Bernie Sanders did not vote for the war in Iraq. Joe Biden did, and many other Democrats did as well. It was a mistake from top to bottom.
And if 9/11 didn't take place, I'm fairly certain that the community response or the approval rating of the war would be significantly lower than it was.
There would have been no war in Iraq, in my personal opinion, if not for 9/11. I think 9/11 probably was an excuse to go to war in Iraq. So I don't think there would have been a war if not for 9/11. And listen, I'm not a fan of George W. Bush as far as his presidency. I don't think he protected us. Condoleezza Rice and his administration received warnings that Osama bin Laden was planning an attack on the United States. I am not praising George W. Bush, the president. I am praising George W. Bush in the last 15 or so years as a human being. I don't think he's a horrible human being. He seems like he is a good husband. He seems like he is a good father. He seems like he is a good family man. He loves his family. He also seems like he is willing to cross the aisle. Go across the aisle and be friends with others like a Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, who have said nothing but nice things about George W. Bush and vice versa. They respect one another. There is a respect there that Donald Trump just does not have. And I think that is very important. So
what you are describing is formality. You're describing career politicians, Brian.
I'm describing
Donald Trump is not a career politician.
I'm describing human characteristics, and I'm telling you that I believe George W. Bush is a better human being than Donald Trump. Let's get back to the actual subject at hand.
If he was aware that this war was under false pretenses, I'm saying he's 10 times worse a human being than Donald Trump.
Okay, well, we don't know that, so I'm not going to agree with that because it's a theory, a conspiracy theory, just like people that say that 9/11 was an inside job. But here's what I will tell you. Here's what we know for sure. A former president of the United States that happens to be a Republican that was in office for 8 years, who was well respected by many, has come out and said that he 100% will not be supporting Donald Trump for presidency. Like it or not, that is a story, and it is a big story.
I agree. It's definitely a story.
Now, Jeb Bush, on the other hand, now let's talk a little bit about
Is it as big of a story as the Minneapolis Police Department disbanding? No.
That's a completely different
but it's
subject.
a good-sized story.
That's a completely different subject, which we're getting to later, so I'm not going to compare and contrast other big news stories. What I'm saying is this is a huge news story. It'd be tough to find a past Republican president that has openly said they're not going to be supporting the second term of a current Republican president. It is a big story. It doesn't help Donald Trump. It certainly helps Joe Biden. Now, listen, Colin Powell came out and said that he's going to be supporting Joe Biden. George W. Bush has not said that, or at least not said that yet. Now, let's talk about some of the cowards. If you're a politician and right now you don't know who you're supporting, you're a coward. Okay, Paul Ryan, you're a coward. John Boehner, you're a coward. They won't say if they'll be supporting Donald Trump or not. Same thing with Senator Lisa Murkowski, who recently said she's struggling with whether to vote for Trump. She's struggling. Yeah, I'm sure she's at home twiddling her thumbs, struggling every day. Another coward. Oh, yeah, and Jeb Bush. Donald Trump went up there on a debate stage against Jeb Bush and said some horrible, atrocious things about the Bush family. And now Jeb Bush, being the political coward that he is, has come out and said he's not sure yet who he's going to vote for. And this is the person that is expected to lead a state or a country, Jeb Bush. At least George W. Bush had the fortitude. I'm not saying that these people have to come out and say they're going to support Joe Biden. But to say you're not sure is a disgrace. And Jeb Bush, you're a disgrace. Same with Paul Ryan and John Boehner. But there's a lot of other things to get to. A lot of other things to talk about today, but make no mistake about it, folks. This is a big story. This is unprecedented. George W. Bush coming out saying that he will not support Donald Trump is unprecedented. And you know what? Colin Powell has had a relationship with Joe Biden over the last 30 to 40 years. This man knows Joe Biden. And my opinion on Joe Biden has not changed. I don't think he's a great candidate. In fact, I've never said he's a great candidate. And a lot of the anti-Trumpers out there, or some people say Trump derangement syndrome, and a lot of the Republicans that, call Democrats libtards because they don't like Donald Trump. Well, a lot of those people that are extreme to the left are giving Joe Biden 100% praise and 100%. I've never done that, but then again, I'm not a Democrat. But I do believe that Joe Biden, and this is very important, at least for me personally. This is important for me personally as someone who probably will vote for Joe Biden, but I'm not sure yet. But I'll say this. I believe Joe Biden is a decent human being. I think he is a decent father. I think he is a decent husband. I think he is a decent man. He's certainly not perfect. I don't like it at times when he shows, his ego at times. I don't like that when it just appears to me.
How about his age?
Well, I'm not going to talk about age because Donald Trump has the same issues. I don't talk about Donald Trump.
When he shows his age.
Trump.
Like last week when he was looking at a teleprompter and he still repeated himself 3 times during an interview. Well, Donald Trump doesn't do anything like that. Joe Biden it's on the verge of looking like Joe Biden is a victim of elderly abuse. Okay,
well, I don't know why you would say that. I don't know what you're talking about when you say elderly abuse.
He has no business running for the president. I don't think he has the mental acuity to handle being president of the United States.
Well, here's my opinion
or the road to being president of the United States.
Well, here's my opinion on that.
The different appearances, the rallies, the debates. I think that is going to be literally very, very mentally challenging. I think right now that he doesn't have what he needs upstairs to actually be in the position that he's in.
So to be clear, you're saying Joe Biden doesn't have it upstairs. A man who served this country 30 to 40. Hold on, let me finish.
I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about 30 years ago Joe Biden, or even 8 years ago Joe Biden. I'm talking about present day Joe Biden.
You got to let me finish the question,
That's fine.
Please. You're telling me that you don't think Joe Biden has the mental capability, or he's unqualified to run for the president of the United States, but yet you've had no problem over the last 4 years saying that Donald Trump certainly has what it takes upstairs to be the president of the United States. To me, I find that to be completely ridiculous.
How is that even possible, Brian?
Sure.
Joe Biden.
Is that a question?
It's a rhetorical question. But Joe Biden literally cannot complete sentences on a regular basis, Brian.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Donald Trump talks for 5 to 25 minutes on a pretty consistent basis.
Let me be clear on that.
I haven't seen Joe Biden in the last 9 months. I don't think I've seen him talk for more than 5 minutes in a row.
Well, you're wrong.
At any point.
Well, that's absurd. He just did a 25-minute speech over the weekend, so you are 150%
Who was that with?
Who was he with?
Yes.
I don't know who he was with. He did a 25-minute speech over the weekend.
With who?
What do you mean with who? With a crowd of thousands of people. He did a 25-minute speech. Do you want me to tell you exactly where? Well, you're wrong. You're saying he hasn't talked more than 5 minutes. He's done a bunch of interviews on CNN for 10, 15 minutes. You're wrong. That's just not factually accurate, what you just said. And, I would rather have, let me be very clear on this. I would rather have somebody as president of the United States who at times shows his age and might repeat himself a little bit, who doesn't lie every sentence, rather than somebody like Donald Trump, who, by the way, doesn't speak very clearly, also repeats himself.
Yes, he does. He speaks very clearly on a very consistent basis, Brian.
Donald Trump repeats himself over and over again. It's part of his narcissism. He does it all the time. Okay?
He does.
All right, well, let me be very clear on this. I would rather have Joe Biden as president, who might at times stumble over his words, who most of his life had a speech impediment. I would rather have Joe Biden than a president of the United States. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. A president of the United States who praised the economy and says George Floyd would be happy about it, too, if he was looking down from heaven.